My stepsister destroyed my life for 30 years with lies, but at my brother's wedding I pulled out the evidence. And her castle of manipulations collapsed in minutes in front of the entire family, who finally saw who she really was. I'm 40 years old. I'm a lawyer. I'm married to an incredible woman, and I have 2 daughters who are my entire life. And after 30 years of putting up with one shit after another, I'm going to tell this story because finally, justice was served. I don't even know where to start, honestly. There's so much to tell that I feel like it's going to take me hours to write this, but I need to get it all out because for years I thought I was crazy, that I was the problem, that something was wrong with me. And it turns out no. It turns out there was one person manipulating everything from the shadows, like some kind of psychopath puppeteer. I guess I should start at the beginning. My dad died when I was 6 years old. Cancer. It was horrible. I don't remember much from that time because I think my brain blocked most of it. But I do vaguely remember the funeral, and my mom crying all the time. After that, it was like a year or two just us, my mom, Carol, and me. And honestly, we weren't doing too bad. I mean, we were poor and she worked all day, but I was happy, I guess. I had my toys and she always tried to be there for me when she could. But then when I was like 7, maybe 8 years old, I'm not completely sure about the exact dates, my mom met Joseph and everything changed. Literally everything. Joseph had 2 sons from a previous marriage, Jeffrey and Raymond, who were older than me, and a daughter exactly my age, Angela. From the moment we all moved in together, I knew something was off about her. You know, that visceral feeling you get when you meet someone and you just know something's wrong there, but you can't explain what. Angela was, on the outside, the perfect child. Like she got good grades, always smiled, helped around the house, said please and thank you. She was basically like a porcelain doll who never did anything wrong. But with me, she was different. When no one was looking, she would say horrible things to me, pinch me, take my things, and then hide them. And if I complained, she would cry and say I had hit her or that I had said something horrible to her, and they always believed her. The thing is that Joseph, my stepfather, from the beginning made it very clear that his biological children were his priority. It's not that he was mean to me directly, but the difference in treatment was obvious even to an 8-year-old kid. Jeffrey and Raymond got allowances. I didn't. They had cell phones. This was like in the late 90s when cell phones were starting to become common. I didn't. They could go out with their friends whenever they wanted. I had to ask permission for everything, and the answer was almost always no. Angela got exactly the same as her brothers, obviously, but she also had this strange power over Joseph where she could ask him for anything, and he would give it to her. It was like he had her on a pedestal. My mom. And this is something that took me years to understand and still hurts. Just let all of this happen. She saw the different treatment. She saw how Angela would do things to me and then lie about it. She saw everything, but she never did anything because, as she told me years later, she was afraid Joseph would leave her, and she didn't want to be alone and broke again. So basically, she sacrificed my well-being for her financial security, which, is great, thanks, Mom. I grew up in that environment throughout my entire childhood and adolescence, and Angela kept getting more and more sophisticated in her lies. It wasn't just saying I had hit her anymore. Now she would make up elaborate stories about how I harassed her, how I stole money from the house. He never did, but she did, and blamed me. How I was violent and dangerous. And the family believed her. They always believed her. My brothers, Jeffrey and Raymond, who at first were neutral, started treating me like I was trash because Angela filled their heads with stories. Joseph openly hated me and let me know it constantly with passive-aggressive comments and punishments for things I hadn't done. When it was time to go to college, I knew I had to get out of that house or I was going to go crazy, literally. I worked like crazy in school, got scholarships, did everything I could to be able to leave, and I did it. I got a full scholarship to a decent university about 3 hours away. Angela also went to college, but she of course went to an expensive private one that Joseph and my mom paid for completely, plus her apartment, her car, everything. I lived in the cheapest dorm I could find, worked 2 part-time jobs to pay for food and expenses, and basically never slept because between work, classes, and studying, I didn't have time. During college, things calmed down a bit because I didn't have to see her every day, but she kept causing problems. She would call my parents constantly to tell them worrying stories about me that she heard from mutual friends, who didn't exist, said she had seen me drunk at parties, barely went out because I was working all the time, made up girlfriends I supposedly had who were bad influences. It was exhausting, even from far away, because every time I talked to my mom on the phone, she would interrogate me about all the lies Angela had planted in her head. I graduated with honors, got a job at a small but respectable law firm, and I thought I was finally going to be able to have a normal life away from all that toxicity. But no, because Angela can't stop being Angela. When I was like 25, living in my own apartment, starting my career, things finally got out of control in a way I never imagined. Turns out Joseph and my mom were going through financial problems, something about bad investments or I don't know what, and they needed help. I, like an idiot, offered to help because despite everything, I still wanted to have a relationship with my mom. I lent them money, not much because I wasn't making a fortune either, but something. A few months later, I find out from Jeffrey, who at that point was starting to see that something was wrong with Angela, that she was telling the entire extended family that I had abandoned my parents in their time of need, that I was a horrible son who only thought about himself, that I had refused to help them when they asked me. When I confronted Angela about this, she looked at me with that innocent face she perfected over the years and said I was misinterpreting things, that she never said that people must have misunderstood. But I was already like 25 at that point, and I wasn't the kid she could manipulate so easily anymore. So I told her I knew exactly what she was doing and that I wasn't going to allow it anymore. She cried, of course, and ran to Joseph to tell him I had threatened her. Joseph called me, yelled at me on the phone for like 20 minutes, told me I was a disgrace, that after everything he had done for me, what exactly? I wondered this is how I repaid him by harassing his daughter. I explained what really happened, but he didn't want to hear anything, and he ended up telling me I was no longer welcome in his house and not to go near Angela ever again. My mom was there. I could hear her in the background, and she didn't say anything in my defense. Absolutely nothing. That was basically the point where they told me to leave and not come back. Although technically I didn't live with them anymore, it was more like an official banishment from the family. And you know what the worst part was? That I felt relieved. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to worry about what new lie Angela was going to make up. I didn't have to walk on eggshells around Joseph. I didn't have to see my mom's look of disappointment because I wasn't the son she wanted me to be. It was liberating in a sad and twisted way. I went on with my life, met Diana, who is now my wife, did well at work, eventually opened my own small practice, had my daughters. Diana from the beginning saw through Angela. She met her at a couple of family gatherings I was still invited to occasionally, mainly because extended family pressured them, and after the second encounter Diana told me, "Your stepsister is a sociopath. Be careful with her." And she was right, completely. But Angela couldn't leave me alone, even after years of minimal contact. When I was like 32, working at my practice, I started noticing some of my colleagues treating me weird. Eventually one of them, who I was closer with, asked me if it was true that I had legal problems in the past related to domestic violence. I was in shock. Where had he gotten that from? Turns out Angela, who somehow found out where I worked, had contacted people in my professional circle and had been spreading rumors about me, saying I had a violent history, that I had abused ex-partners, that I was unstable. This was another level now. It wasn't just family drama anymore. She was trying to destroy my career. I considered suing her for defamation, but Diana convinced me not to because that would only give her more attention and power over our lives. Instead, I basically had to do damage control, talk to my colleagues, explain that I had a stepsister with mental problems who spread lies. It was humiliating and exhausting. I thought after that things couldn't get worse, but I was wrong, because Angela always finds a way to go lower. When I was 38, like 2 years ago, she did something that almost completely destroyed me. She started spreading rumors, first subtly, and then more openly, that I had sexually abused her and her brothers when we were children. Let me repeat that so it's clear. She accused me of molesting multiple family members when we were kids. This accusation went to the entire family. Uncles, aunts, cousins, everyone. And people believed her, or at least some believed her, because Angela is very good at crying and acting traumatized. She never made an official report because she knew she had no evidence, and that if she did, she could face legal consequences for false accusation. But she spread it enough that people looked at me with suspicion at every family gathering. That was the breaking point for me. I decided enough was enough, that I needed to confront my parents once and for all and put everything on the table. I went to their house, asked them to sit down and talk to me, and I told them everything, absolutely everything Angela had done to me since I was 8 years old. All the lies, all the manipulation, all the false rumors. I showed them text messages I had saved, emails, evidence of conversations where she contradicted her own stories. I explained how it had affected me psychologically for decades, how it had affected my relationship with them. Everything. My mom cried. Joseph looked uncomfortable, and basically they told me they didn't know what to believe, that Angela also had her version of things, that maybe we all remembered things differently. It was devastating to hear that after finally having the courage to be completely honest with them. I left that house feeling worse than ever, and like a week later I ended up in the hospital with pancreatitis from extreme stress. Literally, my body was shutting down because I couldn't handle all this situation anymore. While I was in the hospital, Deanna took control. She called Jeffrey and Raymond, who by then were already adults with their own families and their own perspectives on everything, and told them what had happened. And that's when things started to change, because it turns out they also had their own stories about Angela, things they had never shared before because they thought no one would believe them. Jeffrey told me that Angela had made up stories about him too, when they were teenagers, trying to cause problems between him and Joseph. Raymond confessed that Angela had tried to sabotage his relationship with his wife years ago by spreading rumors about infidelity that weren't true. Both apologized to me for having. I've been part of the problem for so many years, for having believed her, for not having supported me. It was the first time in my life I felt like someone in my family really saw me and believed me. With Jeffrey and Raymond's support, we developed a strategy. And I know it sounds calculated and cold, but at that point, I was fed up with being the victim. The strategy was simple. Absolute silent treatment towards Angela. No confrontations, no responses to her provocations, simply treat her like she didn't exist. If she walked into a room, we continued our conversation without acknowledging her. If she sent messages to the family chat, no one responded. If she tried to talk directly to any of us, we ignored her completely. This drove her absolutely crazy. And when I say crazy, I mean she got worse than ever. Over the next 2 years, Angela had several public breakdowns trying to get attention, made up medical crises that turned out to be false, threatened suicide multiple times, which is horrible, and I don't take it lightly. But she had a pattern of doing this every time she didn't get what she wanted. Tried to cause fights between different family members by sending messages, pretending to be other people. It was like watching someone fall apart in real time because she no longer had the control she had always had. Then we get to the event that basically was the climax of this entire 30-year nightmare story. Jeffrey, my older stepbrother, got married a few months ago. It was a big, beautiful wedding. All the extended family was there, and Angela obviously too because she's his sister. Diana and I went with our daughters. And honestly, I just wanted to have a quiet day, celebrate with Jeffrey and his wife, and avoid any drama. But Angela can't help being Angela. At some point during the reception, Diana was alone for a moment because I had gone to the bathroom, and Angela approached her. Diana told me later that Angela tried to convince her I was cheating, that she had evidence, that she was just trying to help her because all women should know the truth about their husbands. Diana, who is much calmer and more diplomatic than me, simply told her she wasn't interested in hearing lies and walked away, but Angela followed her, insisting, raising her voice, starting to cause a scene. I came out of the bathroom just in time to see this, and something in me just broke. I wasn't the scared 8-year-old kid anymore. I wasn't the teenager who felt powerless. I was a 40-year-old adult man who had taken enough. I took out my phone, opened the extended family group chat, like 30 people, and started typing. I uploaded screenshots of messages Angela had sent me over the years. Messages where she herself contradicted her stories, where she admitted having lied about things, where she tried to manipulate me to do things that benefited her. I wrote a long message explaining the complete situation, not with emotion, but with facts, with dates, with specific examples. I explained how she had been manipulating the family for decades, how she had lied about me constantly, how she had tried to destroy my professional and personal reputation. And I sent it, right there, in the middle of the wedding, with the whole family as witnesses. Angela saw what I did and tried to do what she always does. She started crying, said I was lying, that I was taking things out of context, that I was the one trying to manipulate everyone. But this time it was different, because other family members started sharing their own stories in the chat. A cousin told how Angela had made up rumors about her in high school. An uncle mentioned how Angela had tried to create division at a previous family gathering with lies. My mom, Carol, finally, after 30 years, publicly admitted she had seen problematic behaviors in Angela for years, but hadn't done anything about it. It was like watching a house of cards collapse. The entire perfect image Angela had built over decades crumbled in a matter of minutes. People started talking to each other, comparing notes, realizing they had all been manipulated in different ways. Angela tried to leave the wedding, but Jeffrey, in a move that still surprises me and fills me with gratitude, blocked her exit and told her no, that this time she was going to stay and face the consequences of her actions. Joseph, my stepfather, looked completely devastated. He approached me later that night, after all the drama had calmed down a bit, and apologized to me. It wasn't an elaborate apology. He just said, "I'm sorry, Matthew. I should have believed you. I should have protected you. And you know what? It wasn't enough. 30 years of shit don't get erased with a simple, 'I'm sorry.' But it was something. It was a start." My mom called me the day after the wedding, crying, telling me she had been a horrible mother, that she had failed me in the most fundamental way possible, that if she could turn back time, she would do everything differently. I told her I needed time to process everything, that I couldn't just forgive and forget because there was too much accumulated pain, but that maybe, eventually, we could work on rebuilding something of our relationship. Angela has been basically isolated from the family since then. They haven't officially expelled her or anything that dramatic, but no one wants to be around her. No one trusts her. No one wants to hear what she has to say. I heard from Jeffrey that she's going to therapy, though I don't know if it's real or if it's another manipulation to get sympathy. Honestly, I don't care that much anymore. I'm exhausted from thinking about her, from giving her space in my head. Yesterday, my daughters asked me why we don't go see Aunt Angela anymore. That's what they called her, because technically, she's their aunt. And I had to find a way to explain to them in an age-appropriate way that sometimes people aren't what they seem, that sometimes people do bad things even when they smile and seem nice. It's a conversation I never thought I'd have to have with 8 and 10-year-old girls. But here we are. Diana tells me she's proud of me for finally standing up for myself, for finally telling the truth regardless of the consequences. And I guess I'm also somewhat proud, though mostly I just feel tired. Like I've been carrying a 100-pound backpack for 30 years and finally took it off. It's a strange relief. It's not exactly happiness. It's more like peace, maybe. Or something close to peace. I don't know what's going to happen with my relationship with my parents in the long term. Part of me wants to forgive them and move on. Another part of me is still angry about all the years they made me feel like I was crazy, that I was the problem. I probably need therapy. Well, I definitely need therapy. I've been going for like 3 months, and we're barely scratching the surface of all the damage this caused. What I do know is that my daughters are never going to go through what I went through. I'm going to make sure they always feel heard, believed, protected. They're going to know that no matter what happens, their dad is on their side. Always. That's my commitment to myself after all this. Break the cycle. Be the father I needed when I was their age. So yeah, that's my story. 30 years summarized in a few thousand words, though honestly it feels like I left out like 90% of things because there are so many incidents. So many small lies. So many moments of pain that accumulated over decades. But the important thing is that the truth finally came out. People finally saw Angela for what she really is, and finally, after a lifetime, I feel free.